as you're finishing your rough draft of your project, some of you may be wanting to add a little more color to your graph beyond just the lines for the functions. And there's actually a way we can do that. So we're going to take a look at this semicircle that's making up the top half of the right eye. Instead of an equal sign, I'm actually going to think about using an inequality. If I use an inequality, remember from Algebra 1, that allows me to shade either above or below, greater than or less than the graph. So in this case, I want to shade below the graph. So I'm going to change this equal sign to a less than sign. And if you notice, now we've got some black shading and we've got a dashed line outlining the semicircle. Now, because it's an eyeball, I don't really want a dashed line, so I'm going to go ahead and make a shift and change this less than symbol to less than or equal to, and it should give me a solid line. So if I go here and I erase this, you can actually come down to the keyboard and click less than or equal to, and that takes care of this issue with the solid versus dashed line. Now, we have another problem. We've shaded way too far. So the other thing I'm going to have to do is probably restrict the range or the Y values so that the shading kind of stops at 19, right? We want the shading to be everything above 19, but we don't want any of this stuff down here because there's another function that we can probably shade. So let's restrict the Y, and let's say that Y has to be, what did I say? Greater than or equal to 19. Perfect. Now, since we made the eyeball with two different functions put together, you probably could just make this with one circle, but whoever made this made it with two semicircles. We're going to have to do the same thing, only the opposite. In this case, I think I want greater than or equal to, but I don't want all the shading up at the top. So I'm going to do another range restriction and say that we want Y to be less than or equal to 19. So now this has enabled me to shade the minion's eye. There's probably still some fine-tuning work that I need to do to really get me all the way to close this gap. Maybe if I put like 20 or 18 and 20, I could get closer, but I leave that to you to figure out because this is your project. So there's a little bit of guesswork that'll go in here. Okay, so now I've shaded the eyeball. But imagine I wanted the eyeball to be a little bit darker. This is really cool. You can actually double each function. Let's make sure it's the right color. I could double the top half and double the bottom half of the eye. And notice when I click these off, when I click one off from the top and the bottom, I just made it twice as dark. So imagine you were making something where you wanted it to be solid black. You could just keep copying and pasting and copying and pasting the same function over and over again until you got, or the inequality, until you got a nice dark solid black, or whatever color you're going for. Now, if I didn't want to have any of this shading, I could go back and change these inequalities to equal signs, and we would get rid of the shading and just keep the outline the way we had it before. But shading can help you fill in things like eyeballs or really anything else that you're hoping to color in on your graph.